Welcome you all to the new video session. Today we are going to learn about a new technique which is called divide and conquer technique. What is meant by a divide and conquer technique? Suppose we are having a problem and the problem is named as problem P. Let us assume that the problem is big enough to be solved directly. It is having a huge size in it and it is very tedious to solve the problem directly. So what we can do, we can divide the problem into many sub problems. So let us have a close observation to the figure. Let this be our problem. And since the problem is big enough and it is complex too, it cannot be solved directly. So I have decided to split the problem into two sub problems. And so I am splitting it into two sub problems. And what are the sub problems named as? Sub problem is named as P1 and P2. So our problem P has been now divided into two sub problems, namely P1 and P2. Now I am going to check if whether P1 and P2 can be solved directly. So suppose while checking, if it was encountered that P1 and P2 are both still large enough to be solved directly, then what we can do? We have to again repeat the process by dividing these two problems into sub problems. So each time if you find that the problem is large and complex enough to be solved directly, then simply divide it into two halves. So since P1 and P2 both are large enough, what I have done, I am going to divide these two into two subproblems. So first let us divide the problem P1. So P1 is now divided into two subproblems P1.1 and P1.2. Okay, P1.1 and P1.2. So this is the first part of P1 and this is the second part of P1. So I have divided P1 into two halves. Similarly, if P2 is still large, then P2 should also be divided. Now let me divide P2 into two subproblems. So P2 is divided into P2.1 and P2.2. Now instead of two subproblems, we are having four subproblems. In the first level, I was having only one subproblem. In the second level, I divided the problem into two halves, leading to P1 and P2. That is two subproblems. And in the third level, again these two subproblems are further divided into two subproblems again. And finally, we are having altogether four subproblems, namely P1.1, P1.2, P2.1 and P2.2. Now what? Now check if P1.1 is small enough to be solved. Yes, P1.1 is very small enough to be solved directly. Proceeding to P1.2. P1.2 is also small enough to be solved directly. What about P2.1? P2.1 is also small and P2.2 is also small. So we have found that all the four subproblems are now small enough to be solved directly. Now since they can be solved independently, I am going to solve these subproblems all together. So the section from level 1 to level 3, that means from this portion to this portion. In each iteration, we had tried to divide the big complex problem into two sub-problems by reducing the size of the problem to half. At the same time, the complexity of the problem is also reduced to its half. The division process should be continued until we get small sub-problems which can be attempted to solve directly. When we reach at that moment, then we can stop dividing the sub-problems. Now I am going to solve these problems. Now the second section begins, and the process of solving individual problems and combining the solutions to get the actual solution of the main problem is what is known as conquer section. Let us move on to the conquer section. As I already told you, P1.1 and P1.2 are very small enough to be solved directly. So I'm going to solve first P1.1. So P1.1 is solved and the solution of P1.1 is labeled as S1.1. Similarly, P1.2 is solved and the solution of P1.2 is labeled as S1.2. P2.1 is solved and the solution is labeled as S2.1. P2.2 is solved and the solution is labeled as S2.2. So altogether I got 4 sub solutions. Okay, now what? Now let us have a look. We know that P1.1 and P1.2 were actually a part of problem P1. So if I get a solution to problem P1.1 and P1.2, then the solutions of P1.1 and P1.2 can be combined together to get a combined solution, which is labeled as S1. That means this and this, these two solutions can be combined together to get a solution S1, which is actually the solution to the problem P1. Hope you understood why. Because if I got the solutions of these two problems, then those two solutions can be combined together to get the solution of problem P1. So when S1.1 and S1.2 are combined together, the resultant solution will be the actual solution of problem P1. Similarly, we know that P2 was divided into P2.1 and P2.2. So, the solution of P2.1 and solution of P2.2 can be combined together to get the solution of P2. If so, we can say S2.1, which is the solution of P2.1, and S2.2, which is the solution of P2.2. These two solutions can be combined together to get the solution S2. Now S2 is actually the solution to the problem P2. So in this way, I got two solutions. One is S1, which is the solution of P1, and another is S2, which is the solution of P2. Okay. Now we know that both P1 and P2 were actually the part of P. So solution of P1 and solution of P2 can be combined together to get the solution of P. Therefore, we can say that S1 and S2, which are actually the solutions of P1 and P2, can be combined together to get the solution of S. And this S is actually the solution for the actual problem P. In this way, during the division section, we do actually divide the main problems into sub-problems. We continue the process until the problems are small enough to be solved directly. Then, once we get very small sub-problems, we try to solve each of these sub-problems, and in each iteration, the solutions of the sub-problems are combined together to get a combined solution for the higher level. And the process is continued until we get the final solution to the original problem. So the section of division is termed as divide, and the process of combining the solutions is termed as conquer. Altogether, the process of finding the solutions of larger problems to a division and conquer method can be achieved easily. Hope the concept being explained over here is clearly understood to all of you. Keep watching the videos and support me. Subscribe the channel if you are not yet subscribed, and hit the bell icon to get all the notifications.